What's something obvious for everyone, but you only just realized? I didn't know my mom had a name until in first grade the teacher asked us what our mother's name was. Everyone answered but me. I never realized my mom had a name. I questioned my entire existence. I went to her straight after school. She was cooking in the kitchen. I asked her, "Mama, what's your name?" She smiled, stopped cooking and came down to my height and told me her name. It was a sweet memory, but man, I felt shame that I didn't know that sooner. I recently discovered that honey isn't spicy. My husband was buying a bottle of hot honey, and I made some comment about the ridiculous marketing, since all honey is already spicy. Turns out I'm just allergic. I was 30 before I found out that the lights doing that stretchy thing at night wasn't normal. I have astigmatism. So I'm not a native speaker, which might make this somewhat excusable, but for the longest time, I thought sitcoms were named that because the main characters spend most of their time sitting, in a living room, in a bar. This was a long time ago, but the first time I got my eyes checked I was in first or second grade or something. The optometrist told my mom I'm almost completely blind in one eye. She looks at me and asks why I wouldn't say anything. I said I thought everyone only had one working eye. There was a Reddit comment years ago I wish I would have saved. OP was like 8-year-old and saw her dad pump gas, and asked what the numbers were, 87, 89 and 93. Dad said it was the year the gas was made. Newer gas is more expensive. Done deal. That answer worked. Years later OP was like 19, riding in her boyfriend's car and offered to get out and pump gas for him, and ask, "What year gas do you use?" "What?" She explained more and he was in tears laughing. A few years back, I realized that the Christmas song, "I Saw Mommy Kissing Santa Claus," wasn't actually about the mother being unfaithful and putting out for Saint Nick, but it was just the dad dressed as Santa. For almost my entire life, I thought the mom just got around. I was 26 when I realized otherwise. I only recently realized that the phrase, "with friends like these who needs enemies," is actually implying that you have awful friends, not that you have friends so good that you don't need to worry about your enemies. When I was teaching, I said something would be ludicrous and the whole class looked at me with interest and surprise. They didn't know Ludacris the rapper's name was a pun. For the longest time, I always thought prima donna was prima donna. I visited Rome with my mom as I was 6 or 7, we were staying in a line to go to the toilet in Colosseum and she suddenly pointed to a crack in the wall and said that there is something there. I checked it out and it was a Roman coin. Of course I thought that it was real and kept it and told everyone I knew about it. I realized that my mom just staged it all only 10 years later. Still amazing memories though. I was in my 40s when I realized that the phrase, mano a mano, meant hand to hand, as in a fistfight, not man to man. I took Spanish in high school and college, too. Edit, according to my other fine Redditors, it can also mean man to man, and a few other things. Thanks fellow Redditors. I only learned recently that revenge is a dish best served cold, means you should take your revenge at a much later time when your opponent won't be expecting it. That stripper pole's spin, I always wondered how they spun so fast without burning their skin. I was like 12 when I realized that you are supposed to close your eyes to fall asleep faster. Before that I just stared at the ceiling and waited till I fell asleep. My dad was 50 when he realized that sea glass wasn't a living creature. We realized his stupidity when he said, "Wow, they look just like real glass. Nature is so beautiful." We were like, "What the fuck do you mean?" He thought it was a living animal of some sort that just happens to look and feel like glass. We were big shellers at the time, so he was very familiar with the beach. There's really no explanation for this one. Just the other day my wife said, "Hell in a ham basket." I asked, "What's a ham basket?" It's then that she realized it was hand basket. We're in our 30s, it was hilarious. A percent sign is a 0 over 0, actually shows a ratio as the symbol. I just figured that out yesterday. For me, it wasn't until recently that I found out I'm allergic to cucumbers. I used to think the numbness they caused in my mouth was normal, similar to how peanuts affect me. It turns out, I'm also allergic to peanuts, which I only learned about recently too. I was 42 when I had an epiphany about water towers/tanks. They're not for storing water for an emergency, they're for storing water for water pressure. I figured it out when I wondered why the water never went off when all other utilities went out during storms. Felt pretty stupid. As one commenter said when I posted this before, they're not so towns can put their names on them as if to say, "Fuck you. Look how much water we've got." Back in the day some guys were flying around counting geese and ducks for a migration study. Engrossed in their task, they got lost in the days before GPS, so they buzzed a small town's water tower to read the name, then got out their map. I had no idea that they moved the holes on a golf course. I'm 32 years old. I always thought the concept of golf was mega boring anyway, but playing the same course over and over again, who would even bother? No one would, which is why they moved the holes. Horns, the musical instrument, are called horns because they used to be made from horns, animal horns. M&M, Marshall Mathers. That you can take as many bananas as you want. I always assumed I had to take however many were connected together. I've had so many bananas go bad on me, lol. Not me, but a friend. She grew up in a town where there was a giant water tower right above the jail. She just realized that it's a water tower and not a place where the prisoners were kept. She's 32. Banks have height measurements at doors in case they get robbed and can tell how tall the robber is. Didn't know that's what it was for until recently. Different pasta shapes are for holding different amounts of sauce. I was about 40 and I had never heard the phrase, camel toe. My friend made a comment about this girl in a show we were watching, and when he mentioned it, I said, "What's wrong with her toes? They look normal." He spit out his drink as he broke into a long laugh. There is no dairy in Chinese food. Took 30 years for me to realize there's no such thing as a flaming yawn. Antihistamines aren't for any specific allergy, like only for pollen or hay fever. It's blocking your body's histamine. In addition to there being a species called opossum, there is a separate family of species called possum. When people say, "We should go for a coffee sometime," it doesn't necessarily have to be coffee, so you don't have to decline because you don't like coffee. You just say yes and then you do something else. Also, when people dim lights and put candles on, they are trying to set the mood, not save electricity. Dynamite and TNT are different. I was in my late 30s when my friend heard me say, "The ghost is clear," and started laughing hysterically, informing me that the coast is clear. I didn't really use that term too often, so I guess it never came up. We still laugh about years later. That the Fatboy Slim song weapon of choice is quoting Dune. If you walk without rhythm, you won't attract the worm. I typically need to look up the definition of words that I thought I understood. For example, the word triage. I always thought it meant to help/aid people who come into a hospital until they can be seen by a doctor/surgeon/ etc. And I even extended it to mean when someone is really sick, isolate that person or give them a mask. I didn't know it was purely a way to categorize people to determine what order they'll be seen due to how severe their condition is. In interviews, when they say, "Tell me about yourself," they mean as it pertains to work, not generally about yourself, and thank goodness, I don't want to tell them about myself.